Hello, awesome developers. In the previous part of this MERN stack course, we have made the attracting front end of our social media application. Today, we are going to build the REST API to handle the request from client side of our application. So in this tutorial, you will learn how to do the authentication of users on the server side, how to do the create, read, update and delete operations for the users on our social media application. And the most important, how we can fetch the timeline posts for a user according to his or her following users, and also we have to sort them according to the dates. For more, the most common functionality of any social media platform is how to like and dislike a post. And yeah, as we have the post, so definitely we have to create, read, update and delete operations on the post as well. So overall, in this REST API tutorial, after completing this video, you will have confidence on how to do request handling, how to make complex MongoDB queries, and how to perform the routing on the server side. So I think it's enough for the intro. Now let's start the tutorial in our VS Code. But before starting, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button to stay active on the channel for the future videos. Let's start. So here I am making a folder with the name server. And inside this folder I am opening my VS Code. So let's first open the terminal, and in terminal write npm init. It will initialize our package file. So here it is asking some questions, just hit the enter button and you can type the answers, but for now let's hit the enter button just okay. So here is our package.json, and if we look at this, there is no dependency installed. So now we are going to install some packages. I will explain each package one by one. So first of all, I am installing the Express package by writing npm I express. Express is basically the most common used tool for making the servers. It provides us with all the basic tools and methods to initialize a server. Okay. Now I am going to install the Mongoose package. Okay. So what is Mongoose? Mongoose is a dependency that provides us with the method to make the models, or you can say the schemas of MongoDB in our server side. So we will see in detail how we can work with Mongoose. For further, I am going to install body parser. So body parser is a middleware. What it do? It basically checks our HTTP requests that comes from the client side. It provides us with a double check that a data and HTTP request is providing is valid to run on the server. So it protects our server before crashing. At last, I am going to install NodeMon. So basically, when we are going to develop our server side, we have to save our files many times again and again. The simple Node.js file does not support auto reload on saving the file or changes in the file. So therefore we use the NodeMon. What it basically do, when we make any file change and press the Ctrl S button, it will automatically restart our server. So we don't have to do it manually. Now let's go to the package.json. Here this is the command for testing. Now I am just deleting this. And here write a command with the name start, and I am giving it a description of nodemon index.js. So whenever we write start in the terminal, it will start our index.js with the nodemon package. Here on the upper side, I am going to declare a property type. So type will be module. What it will do? Basically, as we do in our React modules, we write the statements like import React from the React DOM and many things like this. If we want to enable the same syntax on the server side, we have to write the type module in the package.json. Now let's save this, and here I am making a file index.js. Index.js will be the starting point of our server. Here first of all I am importing express from express. Okay, let's make the text bigger and I am closing this. Okay, after this let's import the body parser, which is our middleware, and yeah, from body parsers. At last we also have to import the Mongoose to support the models or schemas for our MongoDB. Okay, so from Mongoose. Now these three packages are imported in our index.js. After this, let's make the first instance of our server, and I am going to say it as app, and app will be equal to express and just call the express server. Now to enable the middleware on our express server, what I will do? Here I will say app.use body parser.json, and inside the JSON I am going to specify some properties. I will say the limit of the JSON will be only 30 MB, and I think it's not only 30 MB. 30 MB is really a huge size in the HTTP requests. Okay, furthermore I will say the extended property will be true. You can see the details of these properties by watching the documentation of body parser middleware. Okay, so for more, app.use body parser.url encoded, and here the properties will be same as the JSON. So just copy this. Okay, I think so the internal property like this and paste them here. Now okay, let's make this, yeah, this text size is enough for our tutorial. Okay, so this is the time to connect our server with a database. So here I am in my MongoDB web application. Okay, so this is basically the home page, and if I browse my collections here, so I just have one database, social media. So it was my previous database while I was developing this application. So for the tutorial I am going to make a new database with the name social media and YouTube. Okay, so as it requires at least one default collection name, so I am making this as users. Now let's just create a database. Okay, so here you can see I have my database social media YouTube. After this I have to make a connection string. So for this I will again go to database tab, and here just simply click on the connect button, and as we are making a web application, so go to the connect your application and simply copy this string. Okay, so as we come here, below this write mongoose.connect, and after this you have to specify your connection string. I am just pasting that. Okay, so here you have to replace this password text with your actual password. So I am replacing it my actual password, which is social media 123. Of course I am going to change this at the end of this tutorial before uploading, and I assume my M was small here. Okay, and there should be an L. After specifying the password, you have to specify to which database you are connecting. So just following this slash, you have to specify the name of your database. So I will say social media and YouTube. So yeah, just like this. So this total functionality is actually returning us a promise. So we know that when something is returning a promise, then we can use a statement which is saying then. So yeah, I have to specify a dot. Okay, dot and then. So yeah, after returning the promise, this function will be executed, and executing this function our app start listening. And to start the listening we have to specify a port number, and I am specifying it as 5000. And this is also a callback function. So this callback function is producing a console log. So here I am writing console log and just simply say listening. Now I should format the code, and here you can see first of all I am connecting by this connection string, and as it is a promise, so here I am using dot. Then after doing this connection, start the server listening at the port number 5000, and when it starts listening, then console this. So if I go to the terminal here, and here just write npm start, so it will basically replace the start with the node mon index.js. So just press the enter button. Okay, it's starting. It will take some time for the first one. So while it is starting, I have to mention you some parameters, guys. So just following this connection string, we can specify some properties, which are the use new URL and then the parser, and it will be equal to the true. So this is basically some default parameters that we should specify as they are recommended by MongoDB itself. So and the use unified topology, okay, topology like this one, and it should also be true. So yeah, use new URL parser equal to true, and use unified topology is also true. So now let's save, and you can see that it is restarting, and here is an error, and the error is saying bad authentication failed. So there is something error with my password, I assume. So yeah, after observing the string, I found that the s was small in the password, and this was not the correct name. So this is the correct name. Now let's save again and hope for the best. Here it is starting again, and here you can see it is saying the listening. So it means our server is started successfully. Now I am going to introduce you a new package. So here I am making a new terminal, and new terminal write npm i.env. So just hit the enter button, and it is a very small package. So why we are going to use this? As you can clearly observe this, that this connection string is very confidential for any server, and the port number is also very confidential. We cannot simply write them openly as in the index.js. We need some method to hide them. So to hide them, here I am going to make a new file .env. Inside the .env, I am making a variable port. Okay, so the port will storing 5000, and after this another parameter will be the MongoDB, and yeah, MongoDB, it will be enough. In the MongoDB parameter, it will be a string. So I am just simply copying this one, and inside the env paste it just like this, and now save it. Now how we can use these variables in our index.js? So in index.js, just above the mongos .env.config. Okay, so it is replaced by autointelligence.env, just like this, and this is the function. So yeah, we have to call this. Okay, so as we have to import the .env, here I will say import .env from .env, just like this. Now let's save this, and here instead of using this string, now replace it with the process.env.mongodb. So yeah, this was the name of our variable string. So you can check this here. Yeah, I'm basically just copying this name and pasting it here like this. Okay, for the port number, I am going to use the same method. Here I will say process.env.port, just like this. Now let's save this. To see the changes, first of all, we should stop our server. So here just write the control C, and it will stop our server, and again write the npm start. So yeah, here you can see it's listening now. The working and the result is same, but now our variables are totally hidden. For a better understanding, here I can say listening at the port number, and I can specify the port number as process.env. And we are using JavaScript inside the string, so there should be backticks like this and like this. Now let's save, and in the terminal, if we have a look, here you can see listening at the port number 5000. It's working very fine. As these all are the promises, so we should make a catch statement in case of any error. So here I am writing the catch, and in the case of catch there will be an error, and just simply console log the error. Okay, so yeah, I am making this functionality very simple. Now you can see this total connection with the database very clearly. First of all, the connection string, and then the listening of our app, and at the last stage we are catching any type of error that can occur. So now guys, I am going to make too much folders one by one. But please don't be panicked by watching me making so much folders. I will explain you the purpose of each directory step by step. So first of all, here I am making a folder with the name models. Also I am making a folder with the name controllers. And then at the last I am making a folder with the name routes. So you probably think, what are the meanings of these folders? Now let's have a visualization. Our server starts from the index.js. The index.js file then calls different types of routes. Then these routes finally leads us towards the specific controllers. So if we have a look at the purpose of routes, what are the routes? Routes are basically the pathways to reach a specific controller. Okay, these are nothing but just a path to reach a specific type of functionality embedded in a controller. Okay, now what are the controllers? Controllers are nothing but the JavaScript functions. They are simply just the JavaScript functions. So let's revise this once again. The starting point of our server is always the index.js. Index.js then follows some kinds of routes. For example, the authentication routes, the user routes, and the post routes. Okay, let's say we are following the authentication route. Then we will reach at this authentication controller. And if we are at this user route, then we will reach at this specific user controller. Okay, now where are the models that we have made a folder in our server directory? Basically, models are the JavaScript schemas that our controllers will use to perform specific kind of functionalities. So I think now you have a clear map of these different directories, how they are going to correlate with each other. Okay, now first of all, let's make a route. Okay, so I will go to the routes folder, and here I am making a file, let's say auth route. So auth route means authentication route.js. Inside this file, first of all, let's close this sidebar. Okay, so in this file, first of all, I am importing the express from the express. After this, I will make a router. So router is basically a type of tool that will inform us that this is not a functionality, that this is not a type of action, it is just simple a route. Okay, so here I am making a router, and router will be equal to express.router. So now we have a pathway that is called as router. At the last, I have to export this router. Export default and router. Okay, now I am going to import this route inside my index.js. So here first of all, let's import this. Here I am making a comment and saying it as router, and this was our middleware, so I should also comment this as middleware like this. Okay, it was our .env. Okay, so now let's import the route. I will say import auth route from inside the routes directory and the auth route.js. Let's save this. Now at the last, I will here again say usage of routes, just like this. So first of all, our app is going to use the authentication route. So here I will say auth, and inside, and after following the auth, I will call my authentication route, just like this. The meaning of this, if we want to go on the authentication route that we have made here, first of all, we have to write the /auth in our Google search, or you can simply say in the search bar. Okay, so let's make an output in the authentication router. So here I'll say router dot get and just simply this one, and here request response, and let's make it async first. Okay, just like this. Send the response as response.send, and here write the authentication route. Okay, so what will happen here, if we write authentication slash, then we will go to this authentication route and we will see the result in our browser. So in the terminal, yeah, our app is running fine. I am going to the Google browser. Here I am writing localhost and of course 5000. Then we have to go to authentication route and slash. So here you can see I have the text authentication route. This is basically the response of our server that I have created here, that if someone goes to simply slash after following the authentication route, okay, after following the authentication route, we are simply going to a single slash, then send this response of simply text authentication route. So here is simple auth and then a slash, and here is the response authentication route. So now first of all I am going to make a route for registering a new user on our social media application, or how to log in a user on our social media application. So to deal with the user, first of all we have to make the model for the user, that is basically a schema. So inside the model here I am making a file which will say the user model.js. Okay, inside the user model.js, first of all I am going to import mongoose from mongoose, and after this here I am going to make the user schema. So user schema will be equal to mongoose.schema. Okay, so inside the schema our every user essentially have a username. Okay, so I am making its type as string, and required equal to true means it is important. We cannot neglect a username in our schema. For example, if a user is trying to log in or registering on our application, then it must have a username property. Okay, he or she cannot do any type of work on our application without having a username. Okay, so as the username is too much important, similarly the password is. So I am just going to paste the same properties for the password, and then after the password I will have the first name, and the first name will be also important for every user. So yeah, like this, and similarly there should be a last name. Here I am also making it as important for registering on our website. Furthermore, here I am declaring another field for our users, and this field is admin. So this will inform us if the current user is the admin of our application or not. So the type will be boolean, and by default every user will be not a admin. Okay, so as it is obvious. After this, here I am making some more fields like the profile picture, that we will store it as the string. Okay, and then the cover picture will also be stored as string, and the about of the user and lives in, these all things will be like a string, and the word set, and similarly the relationship status, whatever he or she want. Okay, there should be an relationship, and it will be also a string. And after this every user will have some followers, or maybe he or she not have anyone, but this is an important field of followers, and the type of this will be an array. So the followers array will store the IDs of users who are following our current user, and then similarly there will be an other array with the name following. So inside the followings we will have the user's name of the persons to whom our current user is following. So for the simplicity, if I just make it as following, so it will be more conventional. Okay, so after all of these fields here, I am making the timestamps as true. Okay, so timestamps equal to true. So what it will do, against the each document in our database, it will add the two fields, created at and updated at. So we don't have to manually track these two things. Now I have to export complete this model. So first of all, here I will make it constant with the name user model will be equal to mongoose again dot model, and the name will be of model users, and user schema will be imported in this users, and then simply export default user model, just like this. Okay, it is too much simple thing. Now I have created the first model. It's time to make our first controller. Inside the controller here, auth controller. So this auth controller will simply controls our registering a new user and login a user. So inside the authentication controller, first of all, I am importing the user model from the models, and there should always a JS, otherwise it will raise an error. And then here I am making a function export const register user. Okay, and this function will be an async function with the two parameters request and response to the server. How a new user will register on our social media application? Okay, I should comment this as registering a new user. Okay, so for the registration, every user will pass some data to our server. Okay, so here I am receiving that data. I will make the const, the data will essentially include username, password, first name, and the last name. So where these data will lie, it will lie in the request.body. So it will lie inside the body of the request. After this, I have to map this data in our model. So here what I will do, I will make a constant with the name new user, and here I am targeting our user model. Inside the user model, I will simply just write these properties, or you can say fields, first name and the last name. Okay, I should turn on the word app. So here I have made a new user for which I have mapped all these fields inside the user model. Now let's remember one thing. Whenever we have to practically interact with our server, we will first make a try catch block. Okay, just like this, because now it's time to save this new user in our database and we are going to interact with our server. So here I am making a try and catch block. Inside the try block, here write await new user dot save. It will pass all the functionality of our function until our new user will be saved in the database. Okay, so when it will be saved, it will send us a response with the status code of 200. Okay, you can search for the HTTP status code on the internet very easily. Okay, whenever something goes right and nothing is wrong, then we return a status of 200, and inside the JSON I will return that new user. Okay, in the case if there happen any type of error, response with the status code of 500, because 500 represents an error on the server, and then in the JSON I will make a message, and message will be equal to error dot message. Now let's save this. It's time to connect the route with this control. So I will go to the auth and here I am just simply deleting this route because it is practically of no use. Here I am making router.post because whenever we want to send some data for the server, we use the post request. Okay, inside the post request I am making a route with the name register, and it will call a function register user from the controller. Okay, it is auto imported here. So now we have completed our pipeline for the server, as we have made as index.js that is calling an authentication route, and inside the authentication route we are calling a controller of authentication. Here you can see that. Okay, it's time to test our API. Many times we use the Postman for the testing of API. I am not against the Postman. It is also a very good tool. But practically I use the Thunder client because it is integrated in our VS Code and I find a lot of ease while working with the Thunder client. So you can install Thunder client by simply going to extension and write Thunder client. So this is the Thunder client extension. Just click on this and here you can find the explanation of this extension. It is very useful. So we are going to use this. Okay, if I open the terminal, here is an error inside our, I think so that it is in our auth route.js. So let's find what's the error. Okay, inside the auth. Okay, the error is very simple. Here we have not written auth controller.js, which is the complete name of file. So let's save this and try again. Our server is starting again. So now it is working fine. So here I am opening my extension Thunder client, and here inside the collections I am first of all going to make a new collection and giving it a name of social media YouTube. Okay, inside social media YouTube, here I am going to make a new folder. So there is a new folder and the folder name will be the authentication request. Okay, inside the authentication request, first of all I am going to make our register request. So new request, and the name of this request will be register user. Okay, as this is as register user request is a post request, so here I am selecting post and write the address. So localhost and 5000, then go to authentication route and then the register. Okay, let's confirm this. So yeah, this is simply a register. Okay, as we have to send some data in the body of our request to register a user, so I will go to the body and here make a JSON. Okay, inside JSON first of all there will be the username. So let's say the username is equal to zan@gmail.com, and then we want the first name, which is essential. So the first name is simply Zan, and then we want a last name. So last name will be equal to, let's say, RK, and the most essential thing, the password. So the password, and here let's say the password is 123456. Now let's send this request. So here is the response from the server that we have made inside the controller, that if a new user is saved, then just simply return this new user. So here this is the new user with the username zan@gmail.com, password, first name, last name, and have no followers, no followings. And as we have made timestamps true, so this is the created ad and the updated ad. Now let's double check this in our database. So here inside the social media YouTube database, here I have a collection users, and inside the users collection, here I have one document with the name zan@gmail.com. Means registering a user is working very fine. But there is a problem that the password string is storing in its original format, and it is very dangerous to save a password in its original format or the original string. We have to manipulate it programmatically. So even if someone has access to a database, still he or she will not be able to crack the password. So let's see how I am going to manipulate this password. So first of all, open the terminal, and here I am opening the new terminal and install a package by writing npm i bcrypt. So this package is basically used to encrypt our private data programmatically, and it is very safe library to use for the encryption. Okay, after installing it, just below this user model in the authentication controller.js, I am importing it. Okay, so import bcrypt from bcrypt. Yeah, just like this. Okay, as we have Okay, I should open the word wrap so you can see the whole code. As we have destructured the password from the body of our request, okay, in the HTTP request. So before giving it to the new user, what I am going to do, here I will make a salt. Okay, so what is the salt? So salt is basically the amount of hashing, or you can say the amount of altering the given string. So you can say that it await bcrypt dot generate salt of 10. Okay, so I am keeping the value of salt 10. It is an asynchronous, therefore here I have to place the await word. Okay, after this, now we have to add the salt in our password. So the return of this will be our hashed password, and it will be await decrypt dot hash, and then give the password like this and add the salt into it. Okay, so let's revise the total code. Here I am making the salt from the bcrypt library with a value of 10. 10 is basically the amount of how much we want to alter the password by hashing. After making the salt, we have to add the salt in our password, which is performed by bcrypt.hash. Okay, so it will return a hashed password. Now in the new user model, here instead of simply password, I will pass the hashed pass. Okay, now let's save this, and inside the, okay, I should open the request. Inside this authentication register request. Okay, now let's make an other user, but here I am keeping the name as Jawad like this, and the first name will be also Jawad with the last name as, let's say it is also RK, and the password is same 123456. Now I should initiate my server. Okay, so here my server is running correctly. So let's send the request. Here I am sending this request. There is an error. So basically what is this error? It is saying user validation failed, password is required. So let's see in the controller again. Okay, so the problem is that as in the user model, we have a field with the name password, and here we are passing a field with the name hashed password, which is not present in the user model. So what can I do? Here I will write password, and I am giving the value of hash password to the password field. Now let's format the code. Okay, now you can see it better. Let's save again and try to send the request again. So here the connection was refused by server. Let's see why. Our server is running correctly. So why the request was not sent? Let's try again. Okay, so here is the new user, and the password is this hash string which we are not able to read. Okay, so let's see in the database. So if I refresh my database, and yeah, here you can see this is the Jawad username and its password is hash now. So I should delete this user because its password is simple a string. So I am deleting this just like this one. Now I have only one user in my database. I think now you have a strong idea how we perform hashing on the server side. It's time to make a controller to log in a user which already exists on our social media platform. So what I will do, just close this request, and authentication controllers, just below the register controller, I am making a controller with the name login user. Okay, here I will write again export const login user, and it will be a async function with the request and response parameter. And here, first of all, I will destructure the username and the password from the body of our request. It's very simple. Let's make the text bigger. Okay, now I will find a user with this username in our database. So basically this username is the string that comes along with the HTTP request. Okay, so as I have to interact with the database, so first of all I will make a try catch block, and inside try catch block, here I am finding a user, so I will say await user model dot find one. So yeah, this is the find one, and I am giving the property of username, and the value will be the username. So what it will do, it will find a user with this username that comes along with the HTTP request in our user model, and if it exists in a database, then it will be returned to our constant user. So on next I will say if this user exists, so yeah, then perform a functionality. After finding the user, my next task is to validate its password with the original one in a database. So as the password in a database is a hashed password, and the password we received from the HTTP request is unhashed, means it's just simply a string or a normal password. So to compare it with the hashed password, we have to take help from our bcrypt library. So how it can be done? Here I am making a constant with the name validity. So this is basically a boolean type of variable. Inside this, let's make a await and then bcrypt dot compare the password with the user dot password. So the bcrypt will perform a compare between the password that we received from the request and a password that is stored in the user that we have received from the database. Okay, so if both are same after its algorithm, then the validity will be true, and if it is not same or the password is wrong, then the validity will be the false. Okay, so our next decision will be on the basis of the validity. So I will say validity, if it is true, then send the response of status 200, and then in the JSON just send the user that we found from the database, and if it is not true, means it is false, then send the status of 400, means the unauthenticated user. So here I will send the response of wrong password. Okay, now let's save this. Okay, this complete code will work when the user exists. Now we have to make another possibility if the user does not exist in a database. So here I will make an else statement, and inside the else statement I will again send a response with the status code of 404, and in the JSON like this I will say user does not exist, like this. Okay, and there should also be a JSON. After this, inside the catch block, as we have just written here, similarly I will again write here. So let's save this and try to send a request for a login. Okay, so here inside the authentication request I am making an other request and giving it a name of login user. Okay, this login user request will again be a post request towards our server, so localhost 5000, and the path will be authentication controller login. Okay, so before testing the API, first of all I should connect this controller with the router because I forget to do this. So inside the authentication route, here I will make router dot post and login, like this. It will call a function login the user from the authentication controller.js. Now let's save this and hope for the best. So inside the body, let's see what we have done before. Okay, here we have a username of javad@gmail.com. So I am just going to copy this from, so I am just going to copy this, and here username will be equal to the javad@gmail.com, and the last one password, as we know that the password was only 123456, 123456 as I remember. Okay, let's see again the request for double check. So okay, yeah, the password was 123456. So if I send this request, here you can see it returns as a user that is Jawad, means it is working fine. Now let's try to change the password. If I just write 446 and now let's send the request, here it is saying wrong password, means it is a bad request. Okay, so the other possibility, if the user does not exist, means if I write Jawad 123 and now let's send, it is saying user does not exist. So our login functionality is working too much fine. It's time to move on the other controllers and routes. Let's make the create, read, update and delete functionality for our users. So I am just closing these requests, and here I am closing all these files, okay, to clear up our VS Code. So close all. Okay, now inside the routes I am making another route and saying it as user route.js. Now for the controllers I am also making another file with the name user controller.js. First of all, inside the user route.js I am making text bigger. Okay, importing the express server from the express. Okay, now we have to make a router instance from our server. So express.router, just like this. After this we have to export it by default. So export default and router. Yeah, now we have to import this in our index.js. So here just below our authentication route, app.use and user, and after this here we have to import our user route, but first let's import it here. So I will say import user route from the routes, and inside the routes the user route.js. Now let's save this, and here write the user route just like this, and inside this route let's save this again and see if our server is running or crashed. Okay, our server is running successfully. Now to test this, here I am simply making a request of get. So just here it will again async, so request and response, and in response what it will say, here in the response it will send the status of user route. Now let's test this route. So here target the local host with the 5000 post and the user. So yeah, here we have the text user route, means it's working fine. Let's define some functionality and delete this one. Inside the user controller.js, here I am importing the user model first. Okay, import user model. Now our first request will be to get a user from database. We many times require to get a user from database, and this is going to be the most common HTTP request in our server, get a user, because this request is common for the admin and a non-admin member on our application. So export const get user async request response, and then the function. First of all, we will fetch the ID of the user from the request. So we will send the ID in the parameters of the URL. Okay, after this we will check if this user exists in our database. So const user await user model dot find by ID, and in the ID let's just send this. Okay, as we are interacting with our database, so we should write it in try catch block. So I am making it inside the try, and the catch block is going to be the same, response dot status with the 500 which internal server error, and then JSON the error, just simple as this. Here after finding the user, I will say if user exists. Okay, then what to do, then in the response just send the status of 200 means everything is okay, and in the JSON send the user. Let's save this and make the text. It is over the total user get controller. Now I have to connect it with my route. So here router dot get and just a simple slash with the ID parameter. I will call of controller get user just like this, and here I should add the .js and to avoid the error. Now let's save this. You may notice the one thing here, I have not written the router dot post. Here I have written the dot get because here we are not sending any type of data. We are just sending the ID of user, and which is also not in the body of the request. It is in the URL of the request. So we can just simply put a get request. Okay, let's save this inside a Thunder client. Okay, I am making another folder, and this time the user request, and inside the user request I am making a request get user. Okay, so towards the local host 5000 inside the user, here I have to place the ID of user. So I'm going to the database, and this is the ID of our user, and here I am pasting this. Now send this request. Okay, so it is saying connection was refused by the server. Let's check. Okay, our server is crashed because I think so that I have to write the .js like this. Inside the index.js I have import this. Okay, so I think that was the only error. Now our server is running successfully. Let's try again. So send the request, and here is our user jawad@gmail.com. But the problem is that this request is also sending us the password, and which is a very critical situation. We never want to send the password to a non-admin person in our social media application. So what to do? I will again go to the user controller, and here before sending this response I am just commenting out this. Okay, now I am destructuring this user first. Okay, so let's see how I'm going to destructure it. I will take the password away from its body and the other details as other details from the user dot underscore doc. So basically all these details that we are receiving in the response lie under this underscore doc document. Okay, so what it will do, it will take away the password from the response and all the other fields inside the other details variable. Can now probably have the idea inside the JSON, instead of sending user, I will send the other details. Let's save this, try the request again. So if I again send this, here you can see that I have all the fields again but not the password, and it is a very safe method to send a user to our application. Now we should cover another possibility if user does not exist. So else we have to send the same response as we send in the authentication route with the status code of 40404, and in the JSON I will say no such user exists. Let's save this, and inside the request if I change the ID a little bit and send, then it is saying no user exists. So yeah, it's working fine now. It's time to make the second controller for our user, and the second controller is the update user. Okay, so I am simply making a function and exporting it with saying update user async function with the request and response. And here again, first of all, I will fetch the ID from the parameter. So request.params.id like this, and there it is saying an error with the const export. Okay, so export should be first here. I don't know why I made this error. Okay, let's save this. Now I will fetch some data from the body of our request, and this data will be the current user who is sending the request, current user admin status, and also the password, okay, from the request dot body. So this is the ID of the user that should be updated in the response, and this is the ID of the user, and properly I should write current user ID. So this will be the ID of the user who is performing the action of updating. Okay, these two are the different things, but they can be the same in some scenarios and can be different in other scenarios. So what are the two scenarios? If ID is equal to the current user ID, means the person who is updating an ID belongs to the same account. Means I have an account on a social media application and I want to update myself or my profile. So this is the condition. And the other condition, if the admin of the social media application wants to update the user. So here current user admin status. So if the current user admin status is true or the person is same who wants to update. Okay, in both scenarios we will perform the functionality of updating the user. As you know, now I have to interact with the database, so I will write a try catch block. So first of all, the catch block will have the same code here, and inside the try block I will write const user is equal to await user model dot find by ID and update. Yeah, this one. So I will send the ID of the user, the request dot body as the parameter, which is the information that we want to update, and the last parameter will be new equal to the true. So I think you now have the idea what is this ID doing. So it is basically searching the user in a database who should be updated. And the request.body is the information that should be updated in the response. Okay, so the new information will lie inside the request.body. And the third parameter, new equal to true, means in the response I want to get the updated user, not the previous user. If I don't write the new equal to true, then I will get the information of the previous status of the user. So I hope now you get the point. After this, I will just simply send the response.status of 200.json with the user and make a HTTP request in a Thunder client. So inside the Thunder client, I am making a new request, update user. Okay, so here first of all inside the user route, router.put, and again we will put an ID and call the update user. Okay, why I have made here the put? When we want to update something, we should write router.put. When we want to get something, we should write router.get. These are the different methods for making the request to the server. Okay, let's save this, and here basically I am making it as put request towards the local host, so I can just simply copy this whole one and then paste it here. As we have changed the user ID, so it is wrong one. I should take the original one from here, Control C and Control V. Now inside the body, I should write the information that I want to update. So I want to update the username. So the previous username you can check here, the jawad@gmail.com. The new username can be jawad123 and @gmail.com. And moreover, I also want to update its first name. Okay, so the first name will be equal to Jawad John. Yeah, just like this. Okay, this should be under the double quotations like this. Now let's make a request. So our request is not completing. So when it takes such time during the processing, means our request is not correct. So I'm canceling the request, and let's see why. Okay, if I open the user controller, Okay, here this is the ID. Okay, a very general error that we should make a parameter current user ID and current user admin status in the body to destructure them in our code. So just simply copy this, and inside the update user, first of all I am making this current user ID field, and inside the ID I am copy and pasting the same one. Okay, after this I should also the current user admin status, and let's say it is false, it is not an admin. Let's see in the code, these are the only conditions required. Okay, now let's hope for the best. Here I am again making the request and it is giving me an error. Why it's giving an error? Okay, the error is here should be a comma. Okay, now let's again send the request. So yeah, here is the response, and the response is okay, means our user is updated. Now the new username should be Jawad123 and the first name should be Jawad John. So let's go to the database, and here I am updating the database like this. Here is the result. In the database, the first name is now Jawad John with the username of Jawad123 at the rate gmail.com. So our updating is working very fine. But let's consider a scenario. If the user also want to update its password, okay, in this case this code will fail because he will send a plain text password, and our password is stored as a hashed password in a database. So we will be unable to compare the passwords, and it will result in crashing a server. So how to handle this? Doing any of this stuff with the database, first of all I am making a condition. I am saying if password exists. Okay, so this means if we have destructured the password from the body. So if we are destructuring password from the body, that means the user also wants to update the password. Okay, so if he or she wants to update the password, then make a salt. Okay, so to make a salt, of course we have to use a library, bcrypt library. So I am importing bcrypt from the bcrypt like this. Now add the salt. For the salt I will say bcrypt.gen salt and giving it a value of 10 because from the start we are using the salt value 10. Now the request.body.password like this one will be equal to await bcrypt, and yeah, hash the password with our salt value of 10. So what it will do before updating in a database, okay, before updating in a database the new information, first of all it will convert the body of request, and inside the body of request it will change the password field with the hashed password. So yeah, that's the total functionality of our updating a user. Now I'm formatting a code, and now if I try to also update the password, okay, so password, and let's say now 789456, and first name as Jawad Kevin, and the username is also Jawad Kevin. Now let's hit the send button. Okay, there is again an internal server error. So let's find why this error has occurred inside the user controller. Okay, here I forget to write the await statement. Let's save and try again. Send the request and connection was refused by the server. Let's see why. Okay, so let's send again. It's again refused by the server while it's working. Okay, so now that was just a loading of our internet because my internet is a little bit slow now. Okay, so yeah, the response is 200. Okay, means our password is now updated successfully, and all the other information we can double check by going to the database, refresh the database, and here you can see Jawad Kevin @gmail.com. Okay, this was the case if the user is same or the user is an admin. if it is not. So this block is ending here. Here I am writing else. In the else part, I will send a response with the status code of 403, and in the JSON I will say access denied. Okay, and after this I can also say you can only update your own profile. So by doing this, no one will be able to update any other user just by a search bar or the network access. Now let's save this, and here if I change the current user ID to the 2, and now let's send the request, it's saying you can only update your own profile. Okay, but let's say if I make it the admin of social media application, so now it will be able to update the ID of this user. Let's see towards the John, and let's send. So yeah, now you can see Jawad John, because he is an admin, he can do everything. It's time to move towards the next controller of our user. So let's make it a little bit small, and here I am making a delete user. Delete user is going to be the most easiest functionality in our server side coding. So delete user, I should make the text bigger, sorry. Okay, so async, and then the request response. Okay, yeah, inside this, first of all, again I will fetch the ID from the parameters. So request.parameters.id. Now I will fetch from the body current user ID as I did in updating, and the current user admin status. So request.body. Again, if the user is the same who wants to delete his own ID, or if the user is the admin of our social media application, then he or she can delete this user which have the ID in a parameter. Okay, after this I will check if current user ID is equal to the ID, or if the current user is the admin, so current user admin status. Then interact with the database. So inside the try catch, again for the catch I am just simply just like this, and for the deletion of the user, await and user model dot find by ID and delete, and then this is the ID. Okay, after doing this, send the response with the status code of 200, and in the JSON say user deleted successfully. Okay, now let's save this, and for the catch statement, again I am just going to copy this one, and here just pasting this, and you can see you can only delete your own profile. Okay, now let's test this API request. Here I am making a new request, delete user, and for deleting the user, here we should make a request of delete. So to perform this request, I have to import it in the router, and in the router dot delete, and then simply the ID delete user. Okay, let's save this, and inside the request just I am copying this one. Okay, or this one, update. So just paste this here, and inside the body I am pasting the current user ID. Okay, so this one be just like this. So the current user ID is same, means someone is deleting him or herself from our social media application. And then the current user admin status, and let's say it is false. Okay, I think these two are enough for our deletion. We are just destructuring them. Now let's send the request, and there is again an error. which is just because of, okay, so I should remove this one. Now it is correct. So I am sending this request and here user deleted successfully. Now double check in our database if I update it. Okay. So I have no document in my database, means it's working very fine. Okay, so now to test more functionality, I should make a new users. So in authentication routes here, register a user, and I am just making again the Java user. Send this. Okay, now this is made. Now I am making other user Zen with the first name Zen and the password. Let's say it is same. Let's send this. Okay. After this, I am going to make an other user Umar and the first name Umar, and let's say his password is 6789 and then send. Okay, now we should have 3 users in our database. So let's refresh it. Here I have the 3 documents. Okay, now I'm going to work with an other controller. Okay, so let's close all these requests of Thunder client, and inside the user controller.js our next controller is follow a user. So this is going to be a too much interesting functionality on a server. For this, again export const follow user and async request response and then the function. Okay, first of all, let's fetch the id from the parameter of request. So request.parameters.id. Okay, after this we have to destructure the current user id who wants to follow another user. Okay, so request.body. Okay, after this, first of all, before making any functionality of following, we have to make a check. If the current user id is equal to the id, then what to say? Then response dot status will be equal to 403, and 403 is an action forbidden. So in the JSON write action forbidden. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? If someone wants to follow him or herself, then we should restrict him to doing so, because no one can follow him or herself. Okay, so basically this is the user who should be followed, and this is the user who wants to follow. Okay, so now I think you understand this functionality. Okay, now in the else statement all our other code will lie here. In the else part we have to interact with the database. So let's make a try catch block, and try catch block, and for the catch let's just simply copy this error statement and paste it here. Okay, now inside the try, first of all find the follow user. Okay, so this is the user whom we should want to follow. Okay, so inside the user model dot find by id and follow user. Okay, after this const following user, this will be the user who wants to follow this user. Okay, so user model dot find by id again, and okay, there should not be follow user, there should be the id, and there should be the current user id. Okay, now let's save this. I should check my server is running or crashed. Okay, it's running fine. Here now we have to make an other check, and this check, if follow user dot followers. Okay, so the followers dot include the current user id is not a true statement. Okay, means the user we want to follow of course will have some followers. Okay, so it will have some ids in its followers array. So we are checking if our current user ID is already present in the followers of the follow user, then we should not perform any more functionality because he or she is already following him. But in the case if it is not true, then do the following statements. Okay, so then what I will do, await follow user dot update one, and inside the update one I am pushing inside the followers array just like this, and what I am pushing the current user ID. So means if the current user is not in the followers of our desired user, then inside his or her followers array just push our current user ID. But in parallel with updating his followers array, we should also have to update the following array of our current user. So what I will do, I will say await following user dot update one, and inside this I will say push and following, so yeah, following ID. Okay, I should double check in the user model. So inside the user model, okay, here is our array following and the followers. Yeah, this is correct. Okay, so I think now you have a clear idea how this is going to work. If you still have any confusion, then you should rewind the video around 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, by doing all this, then send the response of status 200, and in the JSON set user followed. Okay, now we have to make the else statement for this part. So in the else part I will send the response with the status code of 403, which is the forbidden, and inside the JSON, okay, inside JSON I will say user is already, okay, user is already followed by you. Just as simple as this. Now it's time to check this total functionality. Okay, so first of all I will go to the user route. Inside the user route, router dot put, and inside the put, as we are updating the following and follower array, therefore I am using the put here, and here put the ID and say follow him or her, and call the follow user controller. Let's save this inside a Thunder client and close this folder. Inside user request, make a new request of follow user. Now inside follow user, make it as a put request, and yeah, I am just simply copying this one and pasting this one here. So now I have to modify this URL too much. First of all, I will obtain a user ID from my database to which I want to follow. So let's say Jawad wants to follow the Zain. So I will copy the user ID of Zain from here. Let's copy this and paste this here and write follow. Okay, and then inside the body write current user ID, and it will be equal to the current user ID of Jawad. So let's copy this, paste this here. So this is going to be our total request. Let's send this. Okay, there is an internal server error. Let's check this again. Okay, here we again forget to put the await statement here and also here. So these are my just general basic errors that I always make. Let's try again. Follow, and it's processing. Okay, the user followed. So this is working fine. Now we should double check in our database. So what I will check, I will go to the following array of Jawad. First of all, let's refresh the database, and I am going to the following array of Jawad here. So here we have only one user ID, which is the user ID of the Zain to which he follow. Okay, so for the Zain there should also be a one user ID inside the followers, so you can see that it is present. Means our this functionality is working very fine. So now let's try to follow on self. Okay, so I'm just copying this user ID and paste it here. Now send the request, and it is saying action forbidden. Now if I try to again follow the Zain, then what will happen? So I will just copy his ID from here, paste it here, and okay, so Jawad ID was that, and pasting it here. Okay, copy this and here paste this. Now send. So it is saying user is already followed by you. So means overall the cases are working fine. It's time to make the next controller of unfollow a user. It's very easy to make a unfollow user request after making the follow controller. Okay, so what I all need to do, I am just simply copying this follow controller and pasting it just below it here. Now I have to change some code. For example, first of all, the comment will be unfollow a user and the name of controller will be unfollow user. Now all the code will be same. The only thing I have to change is this negation sign, because previously in the follow controller I was checking the current user ID should not be in the followers array of the desired user, because we want to add it in the followers array, but now we want to remove it from the followers array. Therefore I am checking it should be in the followers array of the desired user. So after checking this, if this possibility exists, then I have to pull it away from the array. So instead of push, I am writing pull. Now here I am changing user unfollowed, and instead of writing this, I will say user is not followed by you. Okay, let's save this and try this. So inside the Thunder client and here inside the user request, I am making a new request unfollow user, and I am just simply copying the follow user request. Okay, so just simply copying the follow one inside the unfollow. I am making it again put request, pasting the URL. Okay, before sending request, I forget to connect it with our router. So first of all, I will go to the user route and here I will say, okay, let's log the text router dot put and then the ID, and I will call the unfollow user controller. Okay, let's save it and now try to unfollow the user. Okay, so inside the body, I will give the username of, okay, current user ID, and the current user ID will be of Jawad, this one, because he is following this ID. Okay, you can see that this ID. So I am just simply copying this ID, pasting it here, and this is the Jawad ID. So for the Jawad ID, I am copying this and paste it here. Now let's send the request. Okay, it is saying user is already followed by you. So okay, so here I forget to write unfollow. Okay, and inside the use router, okay, so there I also forget to write unfollow, a little mistake by me. Now let's try again. If my server is running, okay, it's starting. So here it is started. Now let's try again. If I send, so the response will be user unfollowed. Now let's double check in our database. I am refreshing the database. So here the database is refreshed. Now let's check in the following of Jawad. So you can say now this array is empty. Okay, now inside the followers of Zen, I should also double check. Okay, nothing is inside the followers of Zen. So that means our unfollow request is working very fine. All the other cases will also work fine as we have just copied and pasted them from the follow user request. Now let's move on to our second model, which is the post model. So I'm just closing all the directories, and inside the models, let's make a new file with the name post model.js. Here again I will import the mongoose from the mongoose, and after this let's try to make a schema of post. So const post schema is equal to mongoose.model, and inside the model, first of all, every post will have a user ID which will have the type of string. Yeah, and I should format the code. Okay, so the type string and the it should be required. Okay, means it is necessary. So true. Now format again. Okay, so now it's giving a perfect look. After the description of the post will always be a string, and then the likes will be the array of user IDs, and after this it will have an image which will also a type of string, and it is not necessary that a post will contain an image. Okay, so I think that's enough for a post model. And the most important thing, I should enable the timestamp. So timestamps equal to true. Now that's the total post schema model. If we need something more in this model, then we can add it on later. It's not necessary that we should make the complete schema in one time, and this is the beauty of MongoDB. After this, I am going to make the route for our post. So inside the post, I am making a file post route.js. Inside this, again we have to import express from the express, and then after this const router equal to express dot router, and of course after they export the router, so export default router. Yeah, now I have to import this inside the index.js. So yeah, here I am importing this as post route from the routes, and then the post route.js. Now let's make the app to use this route. So app.use post, and yeah, this will be the route for our post, and after this make the post route available for this. Okay, now let's save this, and I am closing all unnecessary files, user route and user controller, user model. Okay, let's make the controller for the post model, but before making any controller, let's test this first. So inside the post route, here I am making a simple request router.get and the simply path, then execute an async function with the request and response, and send the response of post route. Now let's save this and double check our server if it is running. So here our server is running fine. Now I will go to my Chrome, and here write localhost 5000 like this, and then the post. So it is saying post route. It's working fine now. Now it's time to make the controller for our post. So inside the controller, I am making a file post controller.js. So here first of all import the post model. Okay, it's not giving suggestion because here I forget to export it. So why there is an error? There should not be an error. Let's double check. Okay, so there should be true like this. Now after this I have to export it as the post model, and it will be equal to mongoose.model. Post will be the name of our model, and it will use the post schema. Now export default post model. Yeah, now it will work fine. We can now import it here. If I just rewrite it post model, so you can see that now we are importing it from our post model.js. We also have to import the mongoose, so just import this. Let's first of all make the create, read, update and delete functionality for our post. So here I am making create new post. Okay, so export const create post will be equal to an async request response, and then the const new post will be equal to request dot body. Yeah, like this, because inside the body of our request we are sending all the details for a new post. Therefore I have just made a constant with the name new post. And there can be a more easy thing in one line. If I here say new post model and then request dot body. So what is happening, as soon as I am receiving the request body, I am also embedding it in our post model, and then I am getting an object of our post model inside the new post. So it saves a lot of time and work. Now let's move on. I have to interact with the database. So first of all, let's make a try catch block like this, and inside the try, like await new post dot save. So our new post will be saved now, and in the response just simply send the status of 200, and inside the JSON we can send the message like post created. Okay, now let's save this, and inside the catch I should also say response dot status of 500 means internal server error with the JSON of error that has occurred. Let's connect this controller with our route. So here I'm just deleting all this stuff. Okay, and create post. Okay, just like this, and I think I have imported the index. Yeah, here it is. Now let's try to make a post request. Okay, means a new post request. I am making a new folder. So new folder post requests like this, and then make a new request create post. And okay, I should change one thing inside the route. It should not be get, it should be post, because we are sending data in the body, so it should be the post. Now let's go to the Thunder client, and here write local host 5000, which is our port number, and post like this. Now inside the body, what we all have to do, just the user ID. Let's say our user ID is from Zen. So I'm copying this and pasting it here like this. Yeah, like this. We also have to make some description for our post. So I can simply say I am Zen here, so we can identify the post more easily. And now let's try this. If I send this by making it a post request, okay, connection was refused by the server. Let's see why it happened. There is an error inside the post route.js. So post route.js, again we forget to write .js. Now let's save this. Still there is an error which is saying invalid schema configuration. True is not a valid type of path at timestamps. So inside the post model, timestamps true is not right. So I spent a lot of time on debugging, and you can only imagine how small was the bug. Here instead of model, we should write schema. Now let's save this, and now our server is starting. Now let's hope for the best. Okay, it's started now. Now let's send the create request of post, and it's saying cannot post. So means our route is not specified, because here there should be only post. Now let's send, and our post is created. Let's double check in the database. So refresh it, and here you can see we have a model post, and inside the post I have only one document with the user ID of the Zen, and it is saying I am Zen here. Okay, let's move on to the next controller of the post, which is get a post. Yeah, it is again going to be a very simple and easy. Basically, making an API is actually very easy work if you know the basics and all the concepts. Okay, and I am trying my hard to teach you all things in very easy manner. So after this, first of all, let's track the ID from the HTTP request, which is request.params.id, and then I have to interact with database. So make a try catch block, and inside the catch block just simply copy this error statement, paste it here, and then const our new post will be equal to await post model dot find by id, and then give the id. Okay, it will return the post if it is in the post model to our constant post here. and then I will send the response status of 200, and in the JSON I will just simply send the post. So okay, now I think it's very easy and it needs not too much explanation. Let's try this in our client. Make a new request and I am saying get a post. Now it should be a get request, so inside the post route I will simply send router.get, and there should be an ID of the post, and then get post should be imported here from our controller. Now let's save this and localhost 5000, let's say post, and send the ID. So from the database I am copying the post ID and pasting it here like this. Now let's send, and here is our post of the Zen. So our get request is working fine. Let's move on to the next controller of update a post. Let's close this, and inside the controller below this get request I am making update a post. Export const and update post async function with the request response and arrow function. Here first of all I will get the post ID from the parameters. So post ID will be equal to request.params.id. Okay, the spelling mistake, const params ID. Okay, now I will fetch the user ID from the body of request. So request.body. Okay, now I think you have the idea how the structure of our request will look. In the body we will send the user ID and the data we want to update, and in the URL we will send the ID of post that we want to update. Okay, now I have to interact with database. So try catch block, and for the catch simply copy this and paste it here, and inside the try block const post. First of all find the post from the post model. So await post model dot find by ID and give the ID of post, just like this. When the post will return from the post model, I will double check the validity and the authentication of this post. I will say if the post dot user ID is equal to the user ID that we have received from the body, then we can update the post, because we are ensuring the security of our application. No other person can update the post of any other person. Okay, so here is the validity check, and now I will say await post dot update one, which is the function of our mongoose. You can check the documentation of update one. Okay, and I will say set the body of the request as the request dot body. So here we have found the post that we want to update, and in this line of code we are updating that post. Okay, now in the response I will send the status code of 200 with the JSON which will say post updated. Let's save this, and if the user ID of post is not same as the user ID in the body of the request, so what will I do? I will send the response status of 403, and in the JSON action forbidden. Okay, now let's save this, and inside the post route I have to connect it router.put and then the ID of post and update post. Let's save this and make a new request inside the post request. Update a post, just like this, and I am making it post put one, because inside the router we have made it put because we are updating. Here I have also made it put localhost 5000 and the post route. Now I have to put the ID. So in the database, let's say I am just copy the ID of this, and here I am pasting this. Okay, now inside the body, first of all there will be a user ID, so user ID should be same. Here the user ID is this one. Okay, so I'm pasting it here. Now I should also make some fields to update of the post. I will say the new description should be hello, I am Zen and I am a developer. Okay, it's a little bit of flex, I know. Just try this. So it is processing and it is saying post updated. Let's check in the database by refreshing it. So here is our new post. Hello, I am Zen and I am developer. Now let's change a little bit of user ID. I will here say something like this. Okay, let's send. And it is saying action forbidden because the user ID is not saved as we have found in the database. Okay, let's move on to the next controller, which is of delete a post. So our next functionality is to delete a post, and here I am making a comment, delete a post, export const okay. So inside this delete post, first of all again I will just fetch the ID from the parameters of our request like this, and now I will fetch the user ID from the request.body and then make a try catch block, and inside the catch simply just copy and paste this. We have made the same functionality in deleting a user, so it's not a difficult one. Now const post will be await post model dot find by id and give the id as the id. Now let's check the validity. If post id if post dot user id is equal to the user id, then we will perform the functionality of deleting. Otherwise in the else part we will again say the same thing as we have did here. Okay, and just paste it here like this, format the code. Okay, now I am saying await post dot delete one. Okay, so it is again a function of mongoose. You can check the documentation and send the response with the status code of 200, which is saying post deleted successfully. Yeah, and now our delete functionality is just completed. Let's try it by save this and inside Thunder client making a new request, delete a post, and as it is going to be a deleting, so here I'm setting it as delete. Inside the post route, here the router dot delete and then give the id and call the delete post functionality. Okay, delete post like this. Now here, okay, just I am putting the same URL because we have changed the method here of our HTTP request to the delete, and inside the body let's just copy this body again, inside the delete paste this and remove this description because now it has no use, and send the request. Okay, connection was refused by the server again. We are just making some small mistakes, I think. Okay, so here is an error. So I have put here a scare braces without any reason. Let's wait to start it again. Okay, so I'm going to send again it, and here it is saying action forbidden because our user ID I think is not same. Let's try to check the user ID because this post belongs to the Zen inside the database. Okay, so inside the post, this is the ID of our post. I am pasting it here like this, and this is the ID of our user. So copy this, okay, copy this and I am pasting it here. Okay, now let's send this, and it's saying post deleted successfully. If I refresh my MongoDB, we have no results, means we have successfully deleted the post. To test the further functionality of our post controller, we should have at least 2 to 3 posts. So I am going to make some post inside the post model by sending post request. Okay, so yeah, this post will be again post created. Now I should make a post with the user ID of Jawad. So this is the Jawad. I am copying his user ID, paste it here, and it will say I am Jawad here. Let's send this post created, and now with the one Umar, so copy this and paste it here. Let's say I am Umar here. Let's send this again, and it's saying post created. Now we should have 3 posts inside the post model. So yeah, we have here the 3 posts. Now I am going to close these requests inside the post controller. Our next request will be like and dislike a post. Okay. So inside this request, again fetch the ID from the request.params.id, which will be the ID of our post, like this, and then the user ID from the request.body, and then the try catch block again. Okay, first of all, I am just making catch block complete like this, and now I am finding this post inside our model. Post is equal to post model dot find by id, and then the id, and it should be an async. So here I am saying await. Now as we know, inside the post model, the likes was an array of user IDs. So if a user likes a post, his user ID will be included in the likes array of that post. Okay, so to like a post, I am making a check. If post dot likes, okay, likes includes the user ID, then we have to do something. Okay, so as it is checking if the user ID is included, but if he or she is liking the post for the first time, then his user ID shall not be in the likes array. So therefore I am here putting a negation sign. So now this line of code is saying if our current user ID is not included in the likes array of that post, then perform the following functionality, which is saying await post dot update 1, and then simply push. So to push the like, here I am saying the likes array, inside the likes array push our current user ID. So this is very easy one, and send the response dot status with the 200, and in the JSON say post liked. Okay, post liked. Now let's try this. So inside Thunder client, I am making a new request and saying it as like a post. Okay, as like post is also updating a document. Here I am again sending it as put request towards localhost 5000 towards the post, and then there should be a post ID. Let's say this is the post of Zen and it's the post ID. So I am just pasting it here, and then after slash say the like. Now inside the body we should have a user ID. Let's say Jawad is liking the post of Zen. So inside the users, and this is the ID of Jawad user. So I am copying this, paste it here, and let's send the request. Before sending, we should include it in our route, otherwise there will again be an error. put simply ID which is saying like, so like post. Okay, let's save this and hope for the best. So connection again refused, otherwise it's working fine. Why? So yeah, post liked. Now let's see in the database, update this database, and inside the posts there is the array likes and it includes the user ID of Jawad. So our like functionality is working fine. Now we have to make a dislike functionality. So we can make a dislike functionality inside this same controller. What I say, if this user ID is already included in the likes and the user is again sending the request to like the post, then actually dislike the post. So yeah, to make it actually dislike, I will just simply copy this and paste it here. Inside of pushing our current user, I am pulling it away, and here I will say post unlike. Now let's save and try to hit this request again, and again the connection is refused. Okay, let's try again. So it is saying post unliked. Let's check in database. So inside the array there is nothing, means our unliking a post is also working fine. Our next functionality is the most important functionality in our API. So the controller is get timeline post. Get timeline post. Okay, so first of all just define it as export const and timeline. Okay, for more specific, let's say get timeline post and async request response, then a function. Okay, first of all I will receive the ID of user who wants to get his or her timeline post. So get user ID from request dot params and dot id. Okay, before making any code for the timeline post, I want to clear you something, that the timeline post for any user includes post of his or herself on and the post of the persons or the users to whom he or she have followed. Okay, so let's repeat it again. The timeline post of a user includes his own posts and the post of the persons he is following. Okay, so here I have acquired the user ID from the parameter of our request. Let's make the text bigger. Okay, after this make a try catch block, and inside the catch block simply just copy and paste the error thing, and here now I am going to receive the post of the current user who wants to get his timeline post. Okay, so const current user post. Okay, and to get these posts, let's see how I will contact with my database. I will say await post model dot find, and for finding I will say where the user ID is equal to the user ID that we have received for the parameters. So by running this query, it will return us all the posts from the post model which have the user ID, our current user ID. Okay, after requiring these posts, I want to have the posts of the users who he is following. So before coding, let's make this scenario possible in our database. If I open my database and inside the users, let's say for the Zen and he is following nobody. So first of all, I will copy the user ID of Zen, and inside my Thunder client, and there is the user request, the follow request. Here I am giving the current user ID of the Zen, and then I am giving the user ID of Jawad to follow. So now let's send this. So now Zen is following the Jawad, and also I want to follow Umar. So I am just copy his user ID, paste it here, and let's send. So now Zen is also following Umar. Now if I refresh my database here, there will be two following members inside the following array of Zen. So there is Zen. Okay, here inside the following there are the two IDs. Okay, so now the timeline post of Zen will include the post of Zen itself and the post from the Jawad and Umar. So okay, I think here we have these three posts. So basically in the timeline of the Zen, these three posts should be present. So now let's move to code. Okay, let's close this follow request, and here I am making an other constant which is the following post that will contain the post from the users that we have followed, and await. Now as I have to interact with the user model, so I should first import it in our controller. Here I am importing user model. Okay, so user model from models, inside models the user model.js. Okay, so why it is not working by auto intelligence, let's see again inside the user model, and here I am exporting the user model. Okay, I don't know why it's not working by the auto intelligence. By the way, let's move on to the code. Here I'll say user model dot aggregate. Okay, aggregate is the most complex query method to interact with the Mongo database. So I will explain the each step of aggregation pipeline to you guys. Let's see how I'm going to do this. So basically aggregation is an array of steps. So first make an array, and inside this array I am making the first step. So our first step will be the matching step. I will say match with the user, okay, whose object ID is the our current user ID that we have received from the parameters. But this ID will not work simply by this. It will not be able to match the ID, because if we have a look at database, it includes object ID in the front of underscore ID. So to make this in a proper format, I will place curly braces, and here I will say new mongoose dot types dot object ID. Now it is able to match with the IDs in our database. Okay, so when this query will run, it will give us a single document, and that document will contain our user ID in its ID field. Okay, after returning this, we will move on to the second step of our aggregation pipeline, which is the lookup. Okay, so what is the basically lookup? We use lookup when we have to match the document in an other model by placing the query in an other model. What that means? Means I am placing the query on the user model, and I want to get the results from the post model. Sorry, here this is the post model. So let's repeat. For example, I am placing the query on the user model and I want to get results from the post models. So what I will do, I will first make an aggregation pipeline, and in aggregation pipeline inside the lookup step, I will integrate with my post model while remaining inside the user model. Okay, so I will say from posts, and then our local field is the following. I will explain each of them, but let's just follow me, and here the user ID as following post. Okay, so here I am saying I want to integrate with my post model, because the name of our post model inside database is post, so therefore I am saying simply post. And the local field is the field against which we want to integrate with an other model. So inside our user model we have a following field, which is an array. Inside this array we have the user IDs. So against those user IDs I want to match with my post inside the post model. Means in the database, here inside the post I have these user IDs, and I also have these user IDs inside the following array of each user. So I want to match those posts whose user IDs are included in the following array of our user. So now I think it's clear to you. And then I want the result as the following post object. Okay, now let's move on to the third step of the aggregation, which is the project. So project is nothing more but the return type of our aggregation, means which fields you want to return as the result of aggregation. So I want to return just one field, which is the following post that I have made here. By default, the aggregation pipeline always return us an extra field, which is the ID field of the object, and I want to neglect that field, so I am just making it as 0. Now let's save this, and we should now see the result in the response. So let's simply say response dot status with the 200 like this, and then inside the JSON. Now first of all, let's, for the simplicity, I am just saying current user post dot concat with the following post, because we want both the posts in our timeline. Therefore I am concatenating my current user post with the following post. Let's save this. Here inside the post route, I am making a router dot get request, and inside the get request, first of all we will have our user ID and then timeline. Okay, and it will call the get timeline post controller. Let's save this, and here I am making inside the post request a new request as get timeline post, and inside the get timeline post, let's say localhost 5000 post. Okay, it is just a post because inside index, and here will be the ID of our user. So as I want the timeline post for the Zen, so just copy his ID. Okay, here is his ID. I am copying this and pasting it here, and now write the timeline. And yeah, inside the body we don't have to make any type of object, because inside the controller we are not interacting anywhere with the body. Yeah, let's say our server is also running fine. Okay, we are ready to put request, hope for the best, and we are sending, and here is the returned array. Okay, so I want to see this response properly. First of all, here you can see that it is returning us an array, because we are performing the concatenation inside our controller, and this concatenation is here, so it always returns us an array. But there is a problem with this array. We want all the posts in the same format, but here what is the problem? The first post, which is his own post of Zen, is in the proper format that we required, but the posts of other users are in an other object which have the name post, and then this object also have an array, and inside this array we have the posts of other users. So it is a very complex type of format, and we have to simplify it. Okay, so now what can I do? First of all, I will spread this whole object. Okay, this object of following post. So let's spread this. Okay, inside the concatenation, here I am spreading this by simply placing 3 dots. Now let's save this and again send the request. Okay, so we should wait for a while because our server was running. Okay, now let's send this again, and here is the result. So what is the result? That even after spreading the following post, still we are getting the same result. Okay, it's not providing us too much functionality still. Now what I can do, I'm going to target this following post. So here I will say, after spreading, target the first member. Now let's see. Okay, we should wait for some seconds. Now let's send again. Okay, there is an internal server error. There is an internal server error because at the 0th index there is not a properly defined property. So if I say at the 0th index target the following post, and now let's save and try again. Okay, here I am sending it, and now you can see our result in the most proper manner that we want to acquire. Here we have all the posts, first post from his own account from the Zen, and then the other posts are from the members to whom he is following. Still there is a problem. When we look at the social media applications, there is a proper alignment of the posts. These posts are according to the at which they were created, not simply the person always have his own post first and then the post of other person. The posts are according to the time at which they are created. Okay, so to perform this we have to sort our this response according to the property created at. So what I will say, first of all, let's sort this, and now here I will say sort the response as, now the sort function, it will have two parameters a and b. It's a simple JavaScript sorting technique. You can search it on a Google and you will find it anywhere. So I will say return b dot created at, so created at minus a dot created at. It will always give us the results in the descending order, because here we have first b and then we have the e, and both are the objects of the type date, so they can perform the functionality of subtracting. Now let's save this and give some time for the server to run again. Okay, now it's listening. Let's send the request, and here now you can see, now we first have the post of Umar because it is the latest post in our database that we want to fetch, and then we have the post of Jawad and then of the Zen. So now you see how easily we have made the get timeline post by using the aggregation of MongoDB. So that's all about our API configuration. I think you have learned a lot of new concepts during this tutorial, and I am hoping to release the next part of integrating our front end with the back end very soon, and I will try to put it on the YouTube in the next 10 days. And maybe it can be a little bit late, but surely our next tutorial will release soon. My only request to you guys that you should subscribe the channel to learn a lot of new concepts in the React. I am putting a lot of effort in making such a long tutorials for you guys, and it takes me a lot of time to build such a premium quality content. So let's subscribe the channel and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I will meet you in the next tutorial. Till then, goodbye.